first one. And today we are here with Dr.Maureen Sier, the Director of Interfaith Scotland, my boss, and I basically would invite her to now introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her faith and what started her on her faith journey.
Thank you, Aparna. It's really nice to be called a boss now and again in my life. I never feel like I'm particularly a boss, but we're part of a team. But and nice to get an opportunity actually as Director of Interfaith Scotland. I don't often talk about my faith because I don't feel that it's overly professional to do it. But today, because this is Interfaith Inspirations, it's delightful for me to get a chance to share a little bit about my own faith. So I became a Baha'i at 17 in the northeast of Scotland in a place called Elgin. And I think it's probably safe to say I was the very first Baha'i in the village. It was the 1970s, and I'd grown up in Scotland in Elgin, and not in a particularly religious household, but in the 1970s everybody was sent to Sunday school. So I had a Sunday school grounding in Christianity, and I loved it. I loved going to church, I loved going to Sunday school, I loved the picnics and the Christmas parties, but I also loved the stories of Jesus and just the sense of community that being in the church and being in Sunday school gave me. I really did enjoy that very much. As a young teenager, I got a bike. I think for my 13th birthday, and with some friends, cycled from Elgin to a beautiful place called Plascarden. Plascarden Abbey. It's set in beautiful hills, and it's a very ancient abbey with monks still in their traditional habits that chant and wave incense about, and it was the first time I had ever experienced anything like that, and it was such a beautiful experience, almost like a sacred experience compared to sort of the very everyday run-of-the-mill experience of life, and it made me feel that actually there really is a God and I need to find out what religion's all about. So I came back from there, I bought a little prayer card, stuck up the headboard of my bed, and all of that kind of stuff. And then probably sometime later, maybe around 16, I started to do yoga. There was a yoga class, and I started to think about Buddhism and Hinduism because the yoga teacher kind of linked it in a little bit to sort of scripture, and thought, gosh, that's pretty similar to what I've been hearing in Christianity. And then at 17, there was a Baha'i exhibition in a place called the museum, the museum hall in Elgin. And a friend called Caroline and I were out wandering around in the Cooper Park in Elgin, probably sort of checking out the boys, really. That's probably the truth. And then I saw this notice outside we were bored, it was a Sunday and it was Elgin, and there was a notice outside the museum hall that said Baha'i exhibition. I said to Caroline, I think it's those little Japanese plants, bonsai. Yeah. And so we thought we were heading in to have a look at some Japanese plants. And the Baha'i exhibition that was up there, everything that I read really resonated with me. That there's one God and all the major religions are from the same source, and they're just expressed in different historical and cultural ways. And I like the equality of men and women that it spoke about, the need for universal education, kind of finding means to abolish the extremes of wealth and poverty, that everyone should have a fair opportunities at life, really. And even at 17, I thought, wow, this really speaks to me. I took away some books. A couple of weeks later, went to a discussion evening, and then just said, that's it, I'm a Baha'i. So I think my parents were particularly freaked out. I think they thought I joined some weird and wonderful cult, and it probably took them a few years to get used to the idea. But that was 17, and I won't say how many years ago that was, but it was close to 45, maybe 50, but at least 45 years ago. And I've never regretted the decision. It's been great. It's a very nurturing community, and I really enjoy being a Baha'i.
For those of you who attended our events and, online events especially this year would know that we have a lot of international speakers and everybody, and a lot of them, to be honest, are from Maureen's connections. So I know like Maureen has traveled a lot and lived in different places. So what was that like? Where all have you gone? Like, have you been on any pilgrimages? What was that like?
Gosh, yeah, actually, funnily enough, very shortly after becoming a Baha'i, and I suppose a lot of people don't know this, I had been brought up at a time and in a place where racism was kind of the norm in society, really. On becoming a Baha'i, I felt very, very deeply that the teachings of the faith about it being one world, one human race, and that there was no place for racism and prejudice. I really did feel that very deeply and thought, gosh, what if I have racism in my heart? That kind of way. And so I worked 3 jobs for about 18 months, and because I'd left school at 15 actually, so I worked 3 jobs for about 18 months and saved money and went to Malawi in East Africa. That was my first ever trip abroad. So I went literally from Elgin to Malawi, and I spent close to 4 months in Malawi, travelling around, visiting Baha'i communities there, staying in all, villages, and it was just fantastic. One of the best experiences of my life. And came away from that time in Malawi realising that actually I would never, ever, ever be prejudiced in my life, because there was just that absolute sense that it's one human race. Again, just that idea that we're just different people born at different spaces on the planet, really, and have different cultural experiences, but we're all human. And I was treated with such love and kindness, had so much fun. I did get dysentery and malaria, that wasn't fun. But apart from that, the rest of it was fun. The Baha'i community there were incredibly welcoming, and stayed in some pretty remote villages, and so really experienced village life in Africa. And then after that I had a taste for travel, and I did go on Baha'i pilgrimage to Israel, and that was really wonderful. And the Baha'i places are on Mount Carmel in Israel, Baha'i holy places. And again, there was a real sense of a global community when I got there, because there were pilgrims from all over the world. Then came, after those experiences anyway, I married Nick and lived in the northeast of Scotland. We had our 4 kids. And it was having raised the children there, and by that time I'd gone to university and I'd studied, etc. And I got the opportunity to do my master's and the PhD. Actually, the university said anywhere in the world where there was some interesting aspects of the Baha'i faith. And so I did my master's on the Baha'is of Samoa and Tonga and their impact on the local culture, which was great. I really enjoyed it. But decided to do my PhD on gender relations in the Pacific, around all the different religious experiences and traditions that I'd encountered there in Samoa. So that was great. And then because of our time in Samoa, we had friends that were Samoan, from New Zealand, Australia, from all that area of the world, so kept up doing some some interfaith work there. And then I won a Fulbright scholarship and went to America for it was again 4 months. 4 months seems to be about my limit away from Scotland. Although Samoa ended up being 5 years, but
4 months or 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5. So got to travel around America and meeting the interfaith community there, and doing some interfaith work there. So yeah, I suppose my Baha'i identity, my interfaith identity, all of it's kind of linked to a little bit of travel, I think, as well. And that sense that we're global citizens, and I've really enjoyed feeling like I'm a citizen of the world.
I agree. It's very rare. Now only with globalization are we able to find so many different faiths and culture, and like a very small community in any specific city. Otherwise, it only when you travel you got to meet different people of different religions, people of different culture, I suppose.
Now they're all on my doorstep. Here in Glasgow, here in Scotland.
Exactly.
And also now I'm reconsidering, and have been for a number of years, the whole sense of travelling internationally because of the climate crisis.
Of course,
there's a whole different story going on in my head now in relationship to travel, and what does it mean. And some of the biggest journeys we ever take are internal journeys, really looking at where we're at and how we contribute to the world. And so more inward journeying, less outward journeying now. Yeah, I think so.
So will just your Baha'i journey and your interfaith journey, they've all been sort of, I mean, it's not really possible to separate them and say, oh, this is when I started particularly, but with my interfaith journey. But I mean, you have ended up now being the director of Interfaith Scotland. So how did that come about, that entering Interfaith Scotland, like as the organization, how did that come about?
We had come back from Samoa to take care of Nick's father, his name was Ron, and he'd had a stroke, and I had enjoyed so much the community development and engagement in the Pacific that I had more or less made up my mind that when I finished my PhD I wanted to work with communities rather than go into academia. And I'd always been interested in interfaith. Even at university in Aberdeen, I had gone along to the Aberdeen Interfaith Association in the 1990s. Yeah, I know, it was predated Interfaith Scotland actually. And but a job came up. It was advertised by at that time it was the Scottish Interfaith Council for a development officer to take interfaith work forward in Scotland. And I just thought, wow, this just suits me to a T. I'd done religious studies, really interested in world religions, and a lot of my PhD was anthropology and cultural history, and so actually really interfaith work is a little bit of anthropology and cultural history. You go into a mosque, a gurdwara, a synagogue, wherever, and you're entering a different culture, a different reality, and so there's always lots to learn. And I applied for the job and got it, and as they say, the rest is history. So it's been a great journey, and I really, really do feel that interfaith relations contributes incredibly to the peace and security of any country. I think if the religious communities are able to get on with each other and also able to work together for the common good, then it's all the better for any society, really. I mean, you come from India. I mean, there's been mixed bag there, but mostly centuries of tolerance and engagement and living together in harmony with occasional little blips. But mostly it has been a good example to the world. So I feel at the moment Scotland is a fairly good example to the world, and that we all need to carry on doing as much as we can to build tolerance and understanding, have friendships with people from all different traditions. And that's my interfaith journey. Thank you, Aparna.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, all of you, for watching. And I know that this is there's a lot more to Maureen's story, I know, and there's actually an article that Maureen has written in depth about her story, and you can find, I'll put the link to the article in the video description, so feel free to have a look at that. So thank you, Maureen, for doing this. And I mean, I've always been interested. I mean, I've been working here for 4 years, and I've always wanted to hear Maureen's story, so I thought, why not everybody else as well? So thank you, and see you all in the next one.
Maybe my next trip will be to India.
There we go.
With Aparna as my guide.